At dinner, my girlfriend chuckled to her group. He's nice but way beneath my standards. They all burst into laughter, until I grinned and replied, then you'll adore existence without me. I settled the tab and exited. That evening, one of her pals messaged me, you made the correct choice. She's been boasting she could find superior. At the meal, she giggled, not the gentle sort, but the type that stings. Her companions chimed in, glasses tapping, tones overly boisterous. He's nice, she declared, sneering. But truthfully, he's simply not up to my caliber. The group chuckled. I didn't. I simply gazed at her, the lady I once believed I'd construct a tomorrow with, and stated softly, then you'll relish life sans me. You could sense the atmosphere alter. Her chuckling halted midway. Even her buddies gawked as if they'd just experienced something authentic for the initial occasion that evening. I didn't debate, didn't clarify. I set my card on the surface, covered the cost, and departed before sweets showed up. No yelling, no fuss, just serene indifference. Because when somebody ridicules you publicly, you don't have to battle for their admiration. You simply depart. That evening, as she was still uploading celebration pictures with forced grins, one of her companions texted me. You handled it ideally. She's been claiming she could upgrade for weeks. She ultimately discovered what upgrade truly implies. We'd been paired for nearly 2 years. Not a fantasy romance, just something reliable, cozy, foreseeable. I labored as a structural engineer, extended shifts but consistent income. She operated in promotions, all customer meals, skyline gatherings, and infinite tales about connections. She used to claim she adored how stable I was, that I didn't require flaunting to feel assured. That was prior to her circle growing noisier, before the fresh acquaintances, the weekend lunches that resembled more like snapshots, the constant chatter about standards. When she hit 28, I organized something considerate. Her preferred eatery in the city center, cozy illumination, gentle melodies, the sort of spot that lets you ignore the clamor outdoors. I reserved it 14 days ahead, ensured her nearest pals could attend, even carried a modest present, a wristlet she'd once indicated while browsing displays. Everything kicked off flawlessly. She appeared gorgeous, her pals were welcoming, and for a bit I genuinely figured this is one of those evenings we'll recall. But I'd begun detecting minor changes over the previous several months. Small remarks about my career, how it wasn't truly her scene, quips about how I still sport the identical timepiece from university, the variety of statements you ignore the first few instances. Until they begin to resemble facts, she's too timid to voice straight. That evening I watched it play out live. It began tiny, an inquiry from one of her pals, partly intrigued, partly digging. So do you ever consider changing professions? You're too clever to remain where you are, correct. Before I could respond, she interrupted, with that refined giggle I once cherished. Oh, he's content where he is, he enjoys his small assignments. It's endearing, honestly, the term endearing lingered, a courteous slight disguised in appeal. Her companions laughed, perhaps not grasping how sharply it wounded. But she noticed it, she always noticed it. That was the intent. It wasn't about wowing them. It was about demonstrating something to herself that she had surpassed me now. I remained silent, grinned, even lifted my glass when somebody suggested a cheer. Because I wasn't going to offer her what she craved, a response. Individuals like her thrive on humiliation. They mistake someone's quiet for frailty, but quiet when selected is a tool keener than ego. When the receipt arrived, she bent over and murmured, "Don't be upset, I was merely teasing." I grinned. I understand, I'm just finished chuckling. She didn't comprehend it initially. None of them did. Until I rose, positioned my card on the holder and said steadily, "Then you'll relish life sans me." The remainder, the shocked expressions, the subdued strain, the clumsy rustle of cloths, that's all backdrop clamor now. What I recall most vividly is the sensation. Not sorrow, not fury, just lucidity. The type that strikes you when you ultimately cease justifying your value to somebody who fails to perceive it. Later that evening, I gathered the items she'd left at my residence. Her adapter, her pullover. That costly face care she insisted I'd spoil if I handled. I didn't erase pictures or restrict her right away. I didn't have to. When you're truly finished, you don't explode, you turn mute. I assumed that was the conclusion. Until a notification appeared on my device around midnight from one of her pals at the meal. "Hey, I just wanted to note, you managed that flawlessly. She's been speaking behind your back for weeks, claiming she could upgrade, that she's only remaining because you're reliable." I suppose she ultimately voiced it aloud. I didn't respond. Not because it was irrelevant, but because it ultimately didn't ache. That notification didn't astonish me. It merely verified what I already recognized. She'd ceased being my companion long before that meal. She was just awaiting the instant I'd provide her a motive to exit. What she didn't anticipate was that I'd exit initially. The following morning I arose to a dozen unanswered calls and a barrage of unopened texts, all from Mia. "Can we converse? You just departed last night. That was childish." It was a quip. Don't turn this theatrical. I gazed at the display for a while before setting the device face down on the surface. I wasn't furious anymore, just finished. I brewed coffee, settled by the pain, and observed the daylight creep across the countertop. That serene instant of calm felt superior to any regret she could ever dispatch. Around midday, there was a rap on my entrance, and when I unlocked it, she was there, shades on, locks bound neatly, clutching a tiny paper sack. "Can we converse?" she inquired gently. I moved aside. She entered, scanned the living space like she was viewing it anew. "You truly just departed last evening," she said. "You humiliated me." I arched a brow. "You're humiliated? That's fascinating." She exhaled, perched on the sofa, and set the paper sack on the surface. Inside was the silver chain I'd presented her. "The one from the prior night. You should reclaim this," she said. "I don't feel okay retaining it." I eyed it. "Retain it. It suits who you were last evening better than it ever suited us." Her mouth tensed. "You're truly going to terminate things over one foolish remark." I rested against the countertop. "It wasn't one remark, Mia, it was a reflection. You ultimately voiced aloud what you've been pondering for months." She glanced down, mute. Then in a tinier tone, "I didn't intend it that way." "You intended it precisely that way," I said. "You just didn't expect me to overhear it." Her gaze shimmered with something. Remorse, arrogance, perhaps both. Then she queried, "So what next?" "You just depart?" "Yeah," I said plainly. "That's precisely what I'm doing." She rose, seized her tote, and for a moment I thought she'd attempt to weep. But she didn't. She just said, "You'll regret this. Folks don't abandon me like this." I grinned faintly. "Then I suppose I'll be the initial." She departed without another utterance. The entrance shut. The quiet that ensued wasn't burdensome. It was tranquil. That evening I eventually activated my device again. Dozens of texts, mostly from her. Some irate, some begging. And then one from a digit I didn't identify. "Hey, I was at the meal last evening. You made the correct choice. I probably shouldn't mention this, but she's been speaking behind your back for weeks. Said she was only with you because you're dependable." I gazed at the text, read it twice. No astonishment, no ache, just verification. I entered back a simple gratitude, then erased the conversation. A few days elapsed. No interaction. No refreshes. The variety of quiet that informs you a section has formally concluded. Then suddenly, a shared acquaintance texted me a capture. Mia's newest upload. A picture of her at a lounge, beverage in grip, subtitled, "Learning to Release and Evolve." The sarcasm nearly made me chuckle. Folks adore discussing evolution when they're the cause something perished. I swiped past it and returned to tasks. But later that week, I received another text. This time from Jenna, the pal who'd inquired about the event. "Hey, I don't know if you want to learn this, but Mia's been involved with her former supervisor. It's been happening for months. We all knew, but she informed everyone you two were unrestricted. I didn't realize she never informed you." For a while, I just sat there reviewing it repeatedly. Not in shock and in understanding, because deep down I'd already recognized. The delayed evenings, the abrupt business journeys, the way she recoiled when her device vibrated during the meal. It all clicked now. And the worst aspect, I wasn't even irate, just weary. A few nights later, I got another text, this one nameless. "HR's probing your girlfriend and her supervisor." Someone forwarded captures of their exchanges. "She's in hot water." I didn't inquire who forwarded it. I didn't mind. I just sat there sipping my brew, gazing at the urban glows beyond my pain. Somewhere in that quiet, I grasped something crucial. Retribution wasn't required. Folks who deceive you always encounter their own consequence. They do it gradually, one falsehood, one reckless giggle at a meal's surface at a time. By the week's end, her online presence was vanished. Shared acquaintances ceased referencing her. It was like she'd vanished, and honestly, that felt appropriate. When folks inquire what occurred, I inform them the facts. Nothing sensational, just a serene conclusion that should have occurred earlier. Because sometimes affection doesn't terminate with yelling or resolution. It terminates with a steady voice stating, "Then maybe you merit someone superior," and the noise of steps departing, firm, sure, and liberated. It had been almost 3 weeks since that meal, long enough for the racket to fade. I hadn't heard from Mia again, not straight at least. Just murmurs through shared pals, fragments of rumor that drifted around and ultimately reached me. Apparently she'd been taking time to recover, whatever that signified. Then one afternoon I got a text from Jenna again. Hey, just a warning, things are worsening for her. HR discovered the involvement. Someone forwarded captures. Her supervisor is paused. She's following. I read it once. Then again. And set my device down. No surge of fulfillment, no validation, just calm. The variety of quiet that occurs when fairness unfolds alone. Gradual, mute, unavoidable. The next day I dropped by a coffee shop I used to visit with Mia. The server recognized me and grinned. Haven't seen you in a bit. Everything all right? Better than it's been in ages, I said. I settled by the pane with my brew, observing folks hurry past. It hit me how normal serenity feels after turmoil, how it doesn't bellow or declare itself. It just is. Later that evening, another text arrived. This time from an unfamiliar digit. You probably don't want to hear from me, but I'm regretful for all of it. I didn't need to ask who it was. The way it was phrased, too cautious, too refined. It was her. I lost my position, she wrote. They said it was for conduct, but we both know why. I just wish you'd conversed with me before you departed. I gazed at the display for a long time before entering a single response. You conversed plenty. I just began paying attention. Then I deactivated my device. A few days later, Jenna texted again. You know what's comical? After she got dismissed, she tried faulting you, said you orchestrated it. HR investigated, found texts where she boasted about the involvement herself. They're considering pursuing charges for info abuse. I didn't respond. There was nothing to state, because the reality was I hadn't done anything. I didn't disclose anything, didn't forward evidence, didn't even share what I knew. I'd merely departed, and somehow departing was sufficient. That's the aspect about folks who construct their existences on feigning superiority over others. They overlook how delicate the foundation under them truly is. Weeks elapsed. Her name surfaced less and less. Tasks grew busier. Existence returned to its calm pace. Morning brew, evening rides, tiny instants that clicked again. Then one evening I got another text, this time from Jenna, not rumor, just truthfulness. You know, I always respected how composed you were. That evening everyone anticipated you'd yell or create a spectacle. But you didn't. You just departed. She couldn't cease discussing it afterward. Said it was the first time she ever felt insignificant. I grinned at that, not out of malice, just acknowledgement. That instant at the eatery wasn't about payback. It was about recovering something I didn't even know I'd misplaced. Self-worth. A month later, I bumped into Jenna accidentally. Same coffee spot. She signaled, asked if she could sit. We chatted about tasks, existence, all in between. There was a simplicity to it, no facade, no ploys. When she chuckled, it wasn't boisterous or strained. It sounded genuine. Before departing, she said softly, you know, she never truly grasped what she forfeited. She thought strength came from position, but it came from quiet. And you possessed that from the beginning. I didn't know what to reply to that, so I just nodded. After she departed, I gazed out at the road. The same one I'd traveled down that evening after the meal. Everything appeared altered now. Not more vivid, not gloomier, just sharper. Later that afternoon, another text came, this time from Mia. The digit was fresh, but the style wasn't. I heard you're involved with Jenna. Guess she obtained what she desired. I didn't respond. Not because she was incorrect, but because the me she recalled would have responded. And that me no longer was. She once claimed I was beneath her standards. Maybe she was accurate. Because the kind of serenity I have now, she'll never attain it. Life has an odd method of balancing after the tempest. Not instantly, but fragment by fragment, like particles settling back to the earth after something shatters. It had been a few months since that meal. Since the chuckling, the exit, the quiet that ensued. By then everything about Mia felt remote, like a section I'd already highlighted, sealed, and stored away. Tasks were consistent. Weekends were serene. I began preparing more, perusing again, engaging in the minor activities I'd neglected when my existence centered on keeping someone else's content. Every now and then her name would emerge in talks or digitally. Someone would note spotting her someplace, or she'd share a saying about evolution or recovery, but it never evoked anything in me. Not resentment, not reminiscence, just a peculiar, tranquil apathy. Because when you ultimately reconcile with what transpired, you cease replaying it. One Saturday dawn, I dropped by that same coffee shop again. The one with the secluded nook table and the aroma of toasted beans that always lingered on your attire. Jenna was there. She signaled when she spotted me. You always choose the same place, she joked. Old routines, I said, grinning. We chatted. Not about Mia, not even about the history, just existence, tasks, arbitrary matters. It felt effortless, innate. At one juncture, she said, when everything unfolded, I felt responsible. We all observed the way she handled you, but none of us spoke up. You didn't merit that, I shook my head. It's not your blame. Some teachings you can't absorb through alerts. You absorb them by traversing flames. She grinned in gentle comprehension. Then she said something that lingered with me. Maybe the flames weren't intended to scorch you. Maybe it was just intended to reveal who couldn't endure the warmth. I chuckled softly. Maybe you're correct. We began encountering each other more frequently after that. Coffee evolved into meals. Meals evolved into tiny instants that didn't require names. It wasn't sudden and it wasn't theatrical, and that's what made it feel accurate. There were no ploys, no trials of faithfulness, no feigning to be more or less than we were. Just truthfulness, ease, and the serene comprehension that neither of us desired to act anymore. Sometimes when we'd sit mute, she'd glance at me and say, "You're too composed." That's oddly appealing, and every time she said it, I grinned. Because that used to be the precise phrase Mia uttered at the beginning. Only this time it didn't sound like praise mixed with disdain. It sounded authentic. A few weeks later, I received an electronic mail from HR at my previous firm. Apparently, Mia had attempted contacting a few individuals I collaborated with, inquiring if I'd orchestrated her. They instructed her to cease reaching staff. That was the final time her name ever entered my sphere. I didn't respond. There was no joy in her collapse, just finality. Sometimes quiet is the sole reply that genuinely concludes a tale. Months elapsed. Seasons shifted. One evening, Jenna and I were strolling home after a meal. The breeze was crisp, the kind that held the subtle scent of precipitation on pavement. She slid her palm into mine and said, "Do you ever ponder her?" I reflected for a moment. "Not really," I said. "Sometimes I ponder that evening. Not her, just how it sensed." "How did it sense?" she asked. I grinned, like the initial inhale after restraining it for too long. She nodded, pressing my palm softly. We strolled mute for a bit. And in that instant, no tunes, no racket, no ovation, I grasped something straightforward. Serenity doesn't arrive when everything's flawless. It arrives when you cease granting authority to what shattered you. A few days later, I discovered the paper sack she'd left that morning after the meal. The one with the silver chain. I'd tossed it in a compartment and forgotten it. I unlocked it, eyed it one final time, and then left it at a contribution container on my route to tasks. It didn't feel like releasing her. It felt like releasing the me that accepted less than I merited. She once claimed I was beneath her standards. Maybe she was accurate. Because where I am now, composed, stable, truly content, she'll never attain, and I'm fine with that. Because some individuals ascend for rank, others develop for serenity. I selected serenity.